Hello and welcome to my channel, I Want to Lose Gaming. Today, we are going to take a look at Iansan, an upcoming 4-star character in Genshin Impact, who honestly kind of changes everything. So Iansan, in case you don't know, is basically the second coming of Bennett, because we finally have an alternative to all the weight that Bennett's been carrying on his shoulders, and Iansan is finally going to help him out and carry some of that weight for him. In particular, I'm talking about the meta implications that Iansan will provide to anyone's account who ends up getting her. But before we dive into all of that, let us take a quick look at Iansan's exploration capabilities. So Iansan's elemental skill, if you press and hold it, it allows you to jog very briskly across, and she actually jogs for quite a long time at an above average speed for about 9 entire seconds. And we can see there that it didn't consume any stamina, and also it doesn't regenerate any stamina during the animation. So there is that bit of, I guess, a drawback when it comes to her elemental skill for traversal purposes. Now, it also has pretty decent uptime if you just use it to jog at that pace, so it is a very stamina-friendly way to cover reasonable amounts of horizontal distance. But of course, you can also dash during it, which drains your Night Soul points much more, but you are able to move at much higher peak speeds. As we can see, that was significantly faster, but also lasted significantly shorter. Now, another really fun detail about Iansan is that, as you can see, her running animation looks like this, whereas in comparison to her short female shoeless peers, they run with the little airplane wing arms. So yeah, Iansan doesn't do that. She runs, I guess, more normally is how I would describe it. So yeah, you can also jump during it, which is convenient for getting over some rocks and stuff, but it does consume a bit of your Night Soul points, shortening the duration of it. One more neat little detail is that she can run on water for a bit, but not very long. Very similar to Verissa, they cannot run on water for a prolonged amount of time. Now, how does her overworld speed compare to her peers? Well, here in this clip, we have Iansan versus Nahida both running across the bridge. Now, you would think that wearing shoes would increase your speed as well as being a fitness coach. But in Iansan's case, you know, I guess she's just taking it easy, giving Nahida a chance. And they actually both have the same ground running speed. So unlike Verissa, who actually has a custom kind of physics and animations for her base running speed, Iansan doesn't have that. She runs at the same speed as her contemporary peers. However, what if we compare Iansan's elemental skill and dash to maximize her speed in comparison to Zhongli, where growing long legs is honestly kind of like cheating when it comes to racing, because yeah, they have very similar times. Zhongli's double dashing throughout versus Iansan's elemental skill. Plus, you know, she did have to hoof it the remaining distance, which allowed Zhongli to kind of close the gap. And of course, you know, when it comes to her being compared to, you know, some of the actual fast elemental skills like Constellation Zero, Verissa in this case, who has multiple charges, who has 2 charges for elemental skill, she crossed this bridge in just roughly 6.5 seconds versus Iansan's nearly 9 seconds. But that's not why you guys clicked on this video. You guys want to see how Iansan can contribute to your account from a combat perspective. So we'll take a quick sneak peek at Iansan's kit. I'll show you guys what I can. And first of all, Iansan is primarily a buffer, and she provides a very substantial attack buff. And being a Natlan character, she is able to use the Cinder City set. But let's take a look at her normal attack animations. It's pretty funny because she rolls her weights into the enemy and then just casually, like, you know, moves it to the side. So they definitely added some additional flavor to her basic attack animations, and her charge attack is just the, oh my goodness. And thanks to the power of video editing, nothing happened at all there. And her elemental burst is where all of her kit's magic happens. So if we use her skill first, and then we use her burst, and we switch off, now you can see this scale thing right here is active, and this is now providing an attack buff to your on-field character, and it is a very substantial attack buff. So the way Iansan's attack buff works is that she actually converts 27% of her current attack stat to a flat attack buff for the on-field character as long as she is over 42 out of her 54 max Night Soul points. And she can provide a maximum of 690 max attack buff at talent level 10 or at constellation 4 and below. And while editing this clip, I noticed that the little icon that's near your character actually switches between Iansan rooting for you as well as a little kind of like skull icon thing for if Iansan is under 42 Night Soul points, at which the attack conversion ratio to buff formula changes to 0.5% of her attack stat per Night Soul point that she has. So yeah, if this does sound confusing, it's because it is. But basically, if she's able to maintain 42 or more Night Soul points, she will be able to more easily provide you the max attack buff. Now, the next interesting part about Iansan's elemental burst and buff that she provides is that it is based on your character's movement speed. We can see here that it's draining very fast, but we can fill it up very quickly by moving a lot. And as we can see, we are actually able to overcome the loss in Night Soul points, which also determines the attack buff by moving a lot. And yes, vertical movement also counts for increasing Iansan's Night Soul points. We can see in this clip that with Constellation 0 Iansan's buffs, Verissa is already hitting for over 100k damage on some of her plunge attacks, which is actually pretty crazy. Now, I almost forgot about this part of Iansan's kit, but we're going to have to take a bit of damage in order to showcase this. I'm sorry, Verissa. You're going to have to take one for the team. So let's go ahead and knock our Registfine buddy down really quick. Oh god, don't get the ice down. Okay, good. She actually also provides some healing for the on-field character. And you can see there, 1,528 healing. And over the course of the entire burst, I mean, look at such a tiny amount of healing that she provides, whereas obviously a character like Bennett provides an insane amount of healing, whereas for Iansan that is certainly not the case. She does not provide anywhere near as much healing. Yeah, while she does technically heal, it's not really a meaningful amount. Iansan can also perform a little dive kick, which is her charged attack while in her Night Soul state. And it's a bit complicated, but after you use her skill, she can do this charge attack for free without having to wind up the basic one animation, yada yada yada. But basically, if you do this charged attack right after you use her skill, it will also provide her 20% attack and more Night Soul points generation. However, for certain characters and teammates, like for example Verissa, she can actually get away, assuming you have enough attack to cap out the buff, without the 20% attack buff that the charged attack gives you. You can actually do a shorter rotation with Iansan, coming closer to Bennett's 1 second rotation with just his burst. So yeah, this is just kind of a neat little tool that they added to min-maxing Iansan, because this is definitely a character who's going to need some min-maxing in so many ways in order to fully draw out her potential. Alright, I've got 10 quick teams for us to blitz through, with the very first one being an overloaded team with Mavwika. And this is actually pretty interesting, which I just kind of learned about Iansan. One issue she has with overloaded teams like this one is that you're not able to continuously apply overloaded in order to keep shredding the enemy's resistances, which is kind of a bit of an issue when it comes to team building for Iansan, especially paired with Pyro DPS characters. Anyway though, we can of course use her as a great 4-star option for other types of archetypes for Mavwika, including a meld team. And this is actually a really good use of Iansan. And actually there, the burning on Mavwika removed the cryo off of the Pudgy guy, messing up my melt combo. But yeah, anyway, Iansan being a great 4-star option there is a blessing in disguise, especially for Mavwika. Now the next team, and I'm just going to keep rattling through these really quickly because we've got a lot to get through. And this next team is an overloaded team for Verissa. And the reason why this team works pretty well is because you have both off-field Pyro application as well as on-field Electro, which means you will get that electro resistance shred, or the resistance shred thanks to overloaded. Anyway, I'm falling behind here yapping about the previous team, but of course you can use this with various Verissa teams. In fact, pretty much every Verissa team can make great use out of Iansan, including this one. And this next team is kind of funny because I did it to, and I'm going to leave it in the video as proof of concept, but I forgot I activated Constellation 6 Refinement 5 Chaska to help me farm stuff faster, and in this case farm artifacts for Verissa faster. So yeah, but obviously she works with Chaska. Not much explanation there needed. Now the next team is Chlorond. Chlorond is interesting because you might think she actually moves a ton, but she actually doesn't move like a whole bunch, but she moves enough to where the buff is on for the most part, and especially with Constellation, I believe 4 off the top of my head, Chlorond will definitely be able to maintain that buff much more effectively. Anyway, up next we have an interesting Kanish interaction where Iansan is able to trigger the Cinder City every rotation for Kanish, and instead you kind of have the opposite problem of not being able to reapply burning if for some reason you do lose that, or if it's multi-wave content where you have to apply pyro to the new wave of enemies. It's the opposite problem of the Kanish conundrum. Anyway, the next team is Xiao. So I want to include this just because this is a team where Iansan's Cinder City can't actually be activated. She can't activate it with Geo teammates or for Geo damage, and she can't activate it for Animo damage because she can't trigger Soul, she can't trigger Crystallize. So yeah, and Xiao has way better teammate options than Iansan, but you know, as you can see, it can still work. Damage is damage. You don't have his best options. Well, there you go. So Arlecchino is another interesting option, and basically you're just kind of replacing Bennett here. If you want to be freed from Circle Impact, Arlecchino can definitely use Iansan, especially if you have Iansan's Constellation 4, but until then, you will definitely lose a decent amount of the attack buff, but it's still a perfectly capable team. And this next team is interesting because it might be one of the better 4-star teams that we have. We have basically Melt Gaming, and you know, the artifacts, as you can see, have been absolutely terrible, except for Verissa's was pretty good because I actually farmed a bunch for that. But in terms of every other character showcase, you know, all their artifacts have been pretty bad. But yeah, obviously you're going to be able to have a new, really decent 4-star only team with Iansan. So there you go, we've only really scratched the surface of this Iansan iceberg, and she is technically usable with literally every single attack scaler in the game. While she's not a strict upgrade from Bennett in most teams, at the very least she's a great option and a side grade for Bennett for many teams. One really nice quality of life feature about Iansan is the lack of circle impact, especially for mobile melee characters who will lose Bennett's buff if the enemy moves. As we can see, Iansan is going to be a meta-defining 4-star character moving forward, and it's hard to go wrong pulling for her if you have the pulls to spare. Having Iansan as well as Bennett will allow you to run 2 attack scaling DPS teams on each side of the abyss without feeling like a major handicap because Bennett is on the other side. Also, you can even run both of them for many teams. Granted, not everything is sunshine and rainbows, because while Iansan in many teams can provide a larger damage buff and free you from circle impact, the amount of healing she provides in comparison to Bennett is very, very small. For many teams, you can get away with Bennett as the healer for Furina, but with Iansan, that certainly won't be the case. Some other issues Iansan has is that she's not the best buffer for Geo and Animo DPS characters because she cannot trigger the Cinder City for them. And frankly, many teams already utilize a Natless support where Iansan's Cinder City wielding capabilities are redundant, and you might need to resort to using something like the Noblesse Oblige. Regardless, even being described as a Bennett side grade to many teams is already a comically high bar. And one last thing worth mentioning is that her full potential is definitely locked behind her constellations, but even at Constellation 0, which she was at throughout this entire video, she's a very formidable force and still a very strong 4-star character. Let me know what you think about Iansan down in the comments below, and let me know if you plan on pulling for her. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.